Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Microsoft Data and the AI South Florida user group. My name is Adriano, your host. And thank you for making the time to be here with us for another great presentation. And before we get started, let's take a look at four things, like comment, subscribe, and click the bell. Help out the group so we can be found in the algorithm and everyone can continue to enjoy those great presentations. Another word is, let us know, where are you connecting from? Use the comment section to let us know where are you located at. And also, during the presentation, if you have any questions, use the live chat to enter your questions. Subscribe to the channel, use the live chat, enter your questions. The presentation has completed. All you have to do is use the comment section to enter your questions there. All right. So without further ado, here we have Torsten. Welcome, Torsten.
Hey, Adriano.
How are you doing today?
I'm feeling good today. So looking forward to the presentation. I have a lot of stuff to cover. Hopefully I can do this within the next 60 minutes and hopefully everything works well this time.
Absolutely. So can you tell us, first of all, where are you located at?
I'm currently located at a small city which is called Bochum, which is Germany. So I have been living here for a while and working for a very big company, which is BP. As some kind of a consultant, trainer, speaker, and for sure database engineer. That is my daily job.
All right, excellent. And can you tell us just a little bit about today's presentation?
Yeah, so today I want to present and share some details of how you can achieve rapid development with SQL database, supported by Visual Studio Code, SSDT templates, bicep templates, and also finally some kind of an Azure DevOps pipeline to push your changes to dev, test, and prod, and maybe to another stage or environment. Yeah, that is what I'm going to present.
Excellent. So, folks, remember, if you have a question, use the chat to enter your question during the presentation. The presentation has finished. Use the comment section and remember to like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell. Now, without further ado, Torsten, it's all you.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you. So hopefully you can see my screen. Otherwise, I think Adriano already informed me about that. So I don't want to introduce myself another time. Maybe the most important information on this slide is my email address. That's my personal one. So feel free to reach out to me in case of any questions with regards to this session or even performance tuning. So normally I'm specialized in performance tuning. So yeah, if you have questions, feel free to drop me an email. I cannot promise to answer all the emails, but I will definitely give it a try. So that's all I want to show. So I just have some notes in front of me, which I'm currently sharing with you, just to make sure that I'm not, that I do not forget anything to mention, which is worthwhile to mention. So you can see as I already mentioned, the structure of the presentation. So we will start with a bicep template, which you should have whenever you start a project from scratch, to make sure that you have some kind of a standardized SQL environment. And when we talk about SQL environment, we are not just talking about the SQL database. There's much, much more you need to deploy in Azure to have a complete environment. Then we will talk about the SSDT templates. So we will compare the SSDT template, which comes out of the box from Microsoft, which is definitely fine, but it is pretty dumb. Yeah? So there's nothing implemented, and that's perfectly fine, but I think we can do it better. It's a lot of work to create an SSDT template, but finally you have some kind like a programming asset which you can use over and over. Also to standardize your code, to make sure that you have naming convention in place, that you already have some kind of a YAML code, which is finally your CI/CD pipeline. A lot of stuff you can do. We will also see that we have something which is called code snippets, which we can use in SSMS, or Visual Studio, or even Visual Studio Code. I think it also works with Azure Data Studio, but I don't know by heart. So that is also about, so the other way around. Having code snippets is definitely something you should have also to stick to naming convention. And I'm not a big fan of writing the same code over and over. I don't want to create the definition of an index over and over. That is pretty boring. So that is something which you can cover in a snippet, in a code snippet. We will see how you can create your own code snippets in Management Studio and Visual Studio, as already mentioned. So, and finally, putting everything together will define your Azure SQL database project within Visual Studio. And you want to push your code in a controlled environment with some kind of approval process and auditing and all this kind of stuff, which you can do by an Azure DevOps CI/CD pipeline. So we will look into an Azure CI/CD pipeline, which I have created. So for sure, there are different ways to create a CI/CD pipeline. And I don't want to say that my CI/CD pipeline is the best. It is definitely working. But maybe you have a much better CI/CD pipeline already in place. But I want to give you the full picture. That is why I want to cover the Azure CI/CD pipeline as well. So let's start with a bicep template. So let me open Visual Studio Code. So, and first of all, I don't want to, no, it's not working. Yeah, okay. It's a little bit hard to see, to be honest, but you know that the idea of a bicep template is to deploy your Azure resources within your Azure subscription or an Azure resource group, finally, in a controlled way and also in a standard way. So that means you create your own bicep templates. For example, you have a SQL Server database bicep template, which where you put some parameters on top, which you now can use in order to have something which is called a main bicep template, or a bicep. It is still a bicep template. So we are using these kind of bicep templates here on the left-hand side as a so-called module. That means you can consume the same bicep template for different deployments, and you don't even need to use all of the modules. Instead, you can create your own environment by either calling the module, or maybe you will skip the module because you don't want to have a storage account already available. So that is the idea. So once you have all your bicep templates available, you can consume them in your main bicep as a module. And the good thing about bicep is that you don't need to worry about the order of the deployment. And in most cases, you do not even need to worry about the dependencies, because this was exactly the reason why Microsoft decided to create Bicep on top of ARM, Azure Resource Manager or Management. Now we use Bicep, which is, first of all, much easier to write, also easier to read. And as already mentioned, one of the, I would say, the biggest benefit of using Bicep is that you don't need to worry about the right order of the deployment. And again, in most cases, you don't need to worry about the dependencies. For example, a SQL database cannot live without a logical SQL server. And therefore, you can either create a database, or you can create a server, or you can change the order. So you don't need to worry about the order anymore, which I really find fantastic. So that makes your deployment much, much easier. So you can see here on the left-hand side, these are all the resources which I was trying to visualize. So let me give it another try. It's pretty. Does it work? No, I cannot blow it up. But you can see that a SQL environment is definitely more than just the SQL database, which you can see here by chance. So there's much, much more. So there is a storage account. Then you have all this kind of security setup. You have you have this kind of Azure SQL preview analytics feature, which I really like. So I will show it to you. That one, so that comes out of the box. So I created the SQL database just a few hours ago. That is the reason why we cannot see that much in the dashboard here. But believe me, finally, you can replace tools like, I don't know, your own monitoring tools or even third-party tools by these kind of Azure SQL Analytics solution. So all these kind of events will go to a log. So and finally, you can visualize them out of the box in this feature, which I really like. So this is just another, I would say, part of the overall puzzle. So, and we have auditing in place. Let me try to open the auditing here. Do I have it in place yet? No, I don't have it, but let me open this one. So this is about auditing. Where's my web browser? It's gone. Okay, cool. I will go with this one. So I need to use this account. This is about auditing. So normally you want to audit your database, and you can define what is finally sent to your log analytics. Again, to secure your database and to have something like an auditing in place, which is definitely required in most of the companies and in most of the environments. So again, I just want to tell you that a SQL database is not just about deploying a SQL database. There is definitely much more dependent resources. And again, all of them can be consumed by modules, which you finally wrap in one main Bicep template, which you will call by a PowerShell script. And hopefully this time it works. Last time it failed for reasons I don't understand, but let's give it a try this time. So development is already in place. So I created the environment up front. Test is in place, but production isn't in place yet. So and you can see the idea is that you can run a PowerShell script finally, or you can do it with Azure CLI. It's mainly the same. It's just a personal flavor, I would say. And you can either create or run the PowerShell script within some kind of nice IDE, which is Visual Studio, or you can even run the code within your, let's call it within your Azure DevOps pipeline. So infrastructure as a code pipeline, which finally just calls this statement here. So this in this case, a PowerShell statement. And that is how it works. You have a parameter JSON file where you define all your parameters, which are in most cases the standard parameters, but for sure you can still override parameters if there's a need. When you, I don't know, create a database with a bigger scale, you can definitely define the compute power, which you can override by the PowerShell statement by overwriting the parameter. That's all. Let me give it a try. So as already mentioned, I will run production now, and hopefully this time it works. I need to pick this account. And maybe in a minute or whatever, we will see that all the resources are deployed. We can go already to the subscription to see what's currently happening. So let me go to this one, to the subscription. So we will see the so-called deployment on the subscription level, because we are creating a resource group, which is a child of the subscription. And within the resource group, we are going to deploy a SQL Server, as a logical SQL Server, the database, storage account, the auditing. So there's a lot of stuff which will be deployed here, which we can see here. And okay, this time it works, which is great. So you can see it's still deploying. And when everything is done, so we will enter with a new resource group, which is called RG demo-prod, which is automatically determined by the standard naming conventions. And you can see all the other resources, which will be finally there, also stick to my individual naming convention, which I want to be honest, which I took from Microsoft with just some smaller tweaks, I would say. So let me go to the resource group. Maybe it's already here. Here we go. No, it is. Yeah, it's here. Great. Maybe not all. No, there it's already there, but I guess we will see, I don't know, 2 or 3 other resources in a minute. But you can see that the bicep template, which was executed by the PowerShell script, finally creates all the required resources, which is pretty handy, because you can create 1, you can create 2, or you can create much more resources or environments by just running one PowerShell script, and maybe override the required parameters like the resource group, very likely. Yeah. So you can completely drop your environment, you can recreate your environment, everything still works, because everything is controlled and set by the bicep template. So that is my recommendation. I don't want to go into detail. Yeah, we can for sure. I can also have another presentation about bicep, but you understand the idea. That is the most important one, and you also hopefully you also understand the benefit and also the need of using something like a bicep template. Yeah. So let me go to my notes. Just want to make sure that I don't forget anything. Logical server, auditing, Defender. So everything is there finally, which is great. So now we have our infrastructure as a code, let's say pipeline. Yeah, consider the PowerShell script as an Azure DevOps pipeline, because again, finally we will just call an Azure CLI command or the PowerShell script, which will be parameterized. And that's it. Yeah. So we have our database in place, which is perfect. And now we can connect to the database. So that is my test environment, for example, which I created beforehand, because you can see that it takes roughly, I don't know, 5 minutes to deploy all the resources, and I don't want to keep you waiting. It's just a logical server with 2 databases. One is called my database, and the other one is created by the bicep template. Yeah, so this one is created already by the Visual Studio solution, as we will see. Okay, that's all. Now we want to create tables. We want to create procedures. I don't know. There's a lot of things you can create. You can create the entire security. Yeah, think about users. So because SQL database is running partially contained or is partially contained users, yeah, so you can create users without having logins in your master database, which is definitely a nice way to create users. And you can create permissions, you can create certificates, you can, every single object, which we will see here in the Object Explorer, yeah, every single object should be part and must be part of your SSDT project. Because the idea of CIDC is that you run your CIDC pipeline and everything which isn't part of your code will be dropped. Because otherwise you cannot rely on something which we will call a single source of truth. Your Azure DevOps repository, where you finally push your code, is the single source of truth. So therefore we have to ensure that all the objects which we define here are finally part of your solution. No one can create objects in Management Studio anymore without at least copying the code from Management Studio to your Visual Studio Code or SSDT's project. Yeah, that is the idea. So how can we achieve this one? So first of all, let me open a new query, and I just want to sheet. So we are here. Yeah, okay, cool. So we will start with code snippets. As already mentioned, the presentation is about rapid development and also standardized development. So how can I ensure that every developer sticks to naming convention and also make sure that we are not writing the same code over and over and over? So there's something which is implemented in Management Studio as well as in Visual Studio. And again, I guess it is also part of Azure Data Studio, which is the snippet manager. So you can see here the code snippet manager. So when you open the code snippet manager the very first time, you can see a lot of code snippets which were defined by Microsoft, which will be installed whenever you run the setup for Management Studio, which are perfectly fine, but I created my own code snippets because I have much better control about the code, the naming convention, and that is how it works. So you can see that I have one folder here where we have, or I created a few, I would say, code snippets, which you usually need to create your SSDT and finally your SQL database. Yeah? So your SQL database project within Visual Studio. So, and it is pretty easy to do this. Finally, it's nothing more than, maybe I can open one of the snippets. Let me go to this folder here. SSDT snippets. Nope, that's wrong. 1 second, I need to go to the right folder because this one is wrong. That is the right one. The other one, or the other snippets, were defined by Microsoft. So you can see these are my individual code snippets. And let me open, I don't know, the table one. Table is a very common object in SQL database for sure. And now we can open that one. You can see how it works. It's an XML definition with an XML schema definition. So you can always go to the schema definition, XML schema definition, to see what you can do with a snippet. There is also something available, which is, I didn't remember the name of the extension anymore, but in Visual Studio, so you can install an extension. I'm pretty sure the name is something like Code Snippet Manager or Template, something like this, which supports you by creating your snippets in some kind of a UI, which is definitely easier because all the, for example, the description and also the content of the snippet is something which is a little bit, I don't want to say difficult, but you have to concentrate much more when you edit and create your own XML file. It's much easier to go to UI, which is supported by the extension. But this is, again, it's your personal, it's a personal preference. So, but what you can see finally is that you can define your code snippets in this way that you can use so-called parameters, which you can see here, for example. Let me blow it up a little bit. Does it work? No, I cannot. Oh, sorry for that. Let me open this in Notepad++. That works. Okay, perfect. So you can see that I have a bunch of, not a bunch, I have a few parameters, which is called, for example, one parameter is named schema, and another one is table. We will see that we have another one, which is the description, table description. And with these parameters, it's very easy to use the code snippets, because finally the code snippet will give you the let's say, how can I say, the frame, and finally we can replace the parameter as a placeholders by, for example, the schema name, the table name, and the table description. So finally it works like this. And again, we can do exactly the same, and we will see this later, I'm pretty sure, in Visual Studio. You can see you have a shortcut, yeah, or you can go right click and say insert snippets. Finally, it's just a shortcut, yeah? So Control K, Control X, if I remember correctly. So now we have a collection of all the snippets which I created, and for sure you can create your own one. And for example, I'm looking for a table, and it works like this. You can see that the focus is currently set on the very first parameter, which is pretty handy, because let's say I have a schema, DBO. So again, I never should create objects within DBO, but this is a presentation. I'm not talking about security here. Let's call the table test. And oh, I forgot to add the description here, but you get the idea. You can see that just with two parameters, I forgot table description. Finally, 3 parameters, we can see, let me blow it up a bit, that, for example, we have a statement which creates a primary key. So you can see that when I now want to create a primary key, it's pretty easy. I just have to say, this is my primary key. I need to decide whether the primary key should be clustered or non-clustered. By default, you know that a primary key is clustered, which is not always the best choice. Let's go with non-clustered. And normally, my primary key is named as ID _ name of the table. The reason why I have my own data type is because I prefer to use my user-defined data type instead of system data types, which makes it much easier. Consider you have, I don't know, a primary key, which is ID test, and this time it is a varchar 50. So believe me, when you use the ID test in another table as a foreign key, people don't even remember anymore that the varchar of the primary key is a length of 50. So I can see a lot of benefits of using your own user-defined data types instead of the system data types for the primary keys. Yeah, for the data and everything like this, I'm pretty. It's pretty unlikely that you benefit from user-defined data types. Yeah? So let's say we have a non-clustered table, not a non-clustered. Yeah, it's a non-clustered table, but it's also a non-clustered primary key. So now we need to see in Azure SQL database. You know that we have only the default one. Maybe that is something which you can even replace when you exclusively work in an Azure SQL database. And maybe you want to give it a fill factor, I don't know, 95, something like this. You get the idea. So with a code snippet, you can see we have a unique clustered index, we have column store indexes, the check constraint, defaults, and so forth. So, and we even have the description of the table, which I forgot to enter. Let's say this is a test. Usually I will do it with a placeholder, which we will find on top of the script here. So in the idea of the MS description, that one is that every documentation tool which is available on the market, like Redgate SQL Doc, which I really like, is capable to read the MS description and will automatically add the MS description, which you can define here, yeah, to the documentation. That means you have a documentation of the tables, the stored procedures, so you can add these MS description to almost every object type. There are a few exceptions, but let's say to 90% of all the objects, you can add an MS description, which is pretty handy because the MS description is also available within Management Studio and Visual Studio and even in the documentations. Yeah. So that is the way I'm creating code. So I will give you another example. Let's go with, I don't know, let's pick up another one, which is, I don't know, let's go with a procedure. Yeah, why not? So I have logging already implemented, which is part of my SSDT template, as we will see. Yeah, so where I log all my procedure errors. Yeah. So, but this is again my personal opinion. I would like to have a table where all the errors will be sent. Yeah. So when my stored procedure is failing, you can see most of the code is already written. Just need to name the schema and the procedure name, which is the parameters, something I cannot foresee. But I don't need to write the same code over and over, which is so boring. Yeah, because if you write stored procedures, I don't know, for half a year, I'm pretty sure you remember how to create a stored procedure, and there is no fun, there is no challenge anymore to create a stored procedure. The challenge is to create the SQL statement, but not the way to create the, I would say, the stored procedure itself. Yeah. So that is how it works. So what you have to do, as already mentioned, so when you have your SSDT templates available, not the SSDT, sorry, the code snippets available, I just want to give you one hint because this is something which I find a little bit confusing. So you have to go to Tools, as mentioned, Code Snippet, then you can create a new folder or whatever. You can even pick up an entire folder, but you have to say add, not import. Don't ask me what the difference between add or the other way around. There's definitely a difference, but don't ask me what import will do. It will not provide you these snippets afterwards. Yeah. So instead you have to go with the add button. Yeah? Because otherwise people always, and it's the same for me, I always struggle when I set up a new machine or whatever, or I will send these code snippets to my co-workers. So I always have to remind myself, is this add or import? Now I learned it by heart. It is add. Yeah. So, and when you have your code snippets available, just add the entire folder and they will be there. Yeah. You can see this is, by the way, the information which we have seen in the header. In the header of the XML file, you remember I opened, maybe I still have it open. Yeah, this is what you define here. Table description. No, sorry, here's that one. Snippet, title, author, description. Yeah, for sure. You can give it a much more meaningful description if you like, but you get the idea that a developer already understands what is the aim of a table snippet. I mean, it's not very hard to guess, but maybe you can also version this one or whatever. The good thing about you remember that finally everything is an XML file. So I have my own, maybe I find this by heart. Let me go to this one and let me go to code repository and yeah, SQL, that one maybe. It's a project. No, it's the other one. It's this one. So no, I mix it up. Let me go with this one. This is the solution. Yeah, I was looking for the solution. So you remember that every code snippet is an XML file, which you either can create manually by hand or with the extension. I didn't remember the name anymore, but I'm pretty sure we'll find it. So, and because these are XML files, continue, I can put all my code snippets in a Visual Studio, a project. So, and you can see I have a lot of code snippets here, not just for creating objects, but also for analyzing the health check or doing some health check or doing some I don't know, performance optimization or analysis. So I have a bunch, maybe nearly 100, which I can take. But you already understand that all these XML or all these snippet files can now be sent to an Azure DevOps repository. So you have some kind of versioning. New developer can consume the snippets by just synchronizing the repository. It's a pretty handy way to exchange these kind of code snippets and other programming assets, yeah, by an Azure DevOps repository. I really like the idea. Currently, I'm not connected to one of this because I changed my Azure DevOps organization, but I'm pretty sure you are able to do it on your own. So that was everything. Hopefully, let me go to my notes. I don't want to forget anything. Yeah, yeah, good one. So there is something. No, here. No, we are done. We are done with the SSDT template. So I'm a little bit confused. Sorry for that one. We are here. So I started in a different order because I think the order which I take this time is a little bit more meaningful, because now we have all the programming asset, all the snippets available to start with your programming, to start your Visual Studio project, right? And by the way, if there are any questions, feel free to interrupt me, or I don't know, write your question in the chat. I'm pretty sure Adriano will interrupt me. Yeah, so otherwise I will continue. Okay, so you understand we have a bicep template to create all the required resources in Azure. So fine, so that is what we need. We have our code snippets to have a standardized and also rapid development. So, and now we want to understand how to create your SQL database within Visual Studio. So let's do it. So I will go to Visual Studio, not to this solution. Let me close this one because it's pretty memory and CPU consuming. That's fine. So usually you start with this. I will create a new solution. I don't want to create a new solution because I'm pretty sure you know how to create an empty solution. But finally, you want to add a new project. So, and what you get from Microsoft, and again, that's perfectly fine. It's a very good start, right? But the more databases you create, the more you think it can be a little bit more smarter. Yeah, let's do it in this way. And for sure, it's dependent on your own programming and naming conventions and everything like this. So therefore, I fully understand that Microsoft is not providing like something like a customized SSDT template like I do. Yeah, so that's perfectly fine. But let's open a SQL database SSDT template first. So I will search for SQL. Let me go down. Let me go. Why it is not showing? See, it's pretty. That's too much. SQL. Oh, here we go. So SQL database project. That is the one which you can use to. Just want to make sure that I'm not using. That's the one. Yes. That is one. I can differentiate by the icon. That is the icon Microsoft have in place, and that is what I have in place. So I don't want to mix it up because otherwise it's a little bit confusing when I have to go when I have to create a new project another time. So that is what you get from Microsoft. Let's say next, and I will give the project name a meaningful name, which is usually the name of your database. Yeah? So and call it my database. And I already have one, which is called my database. Let's call it, I don't know, number 4. So let me create the SSDT project, yeah, based on the template. It will take roughly 10 seconds. Maybe that's a good time to ask questions, if you have any. No question? Okay, cool. So you can see that finally we will end up with something like this. This is my SSDT template. It has nothing. It only tells Visual Studio that this is SQL code. We have properties for sure, yeah, which are dependent on the type of the project. You can see already by the name, SQL CLR, CLR build, we have SQL CMD variables. So it's pretty likely that we selected an SSDT or SQL database project for this solution. That's fine, but there is nothing. It is really just a template, and it is a perfect start. But now consider the following. I want to create maybe more than one database in this year. And I want to have a standardized way to create my own SQL projects. I want to have support, maybe by already predefined scripts. I don't know. I want to configure the SQL database. And when I talk about configuration, I'm not talking about BICEP, because BICEP has no access to the SQL database itself, just to the resource. But maybe think about, I don't know, optimize for hoc workloads. That is specific optimization and also configuration within SQL database. So I want to control the configuration within my SSDT project. So, and it starts like so, and it starts like this. So I will drop that one because there is no need to keep it. And I need to drop this here as well because it's still there. I mean the project, sorry. Here. It was called for. I don't see it anymore. Okay, don't ask me why it's not here anymore. Where's my solution? Here. And usually the full or the objects are not created from the disk, but just from the solution. That was the reason why I was searching for the folder within it was a Windows Explorer finally, but this time nothing was there. Maybe I forgot to save or whatever the reason is. Anyway, I want to get rid of the SSDT project anyway. So, and now I want to use my own SSDT template. And before I will tell you how to create the template, I will add a new project based on my SSDT project. So this time you can see already on the left-hand side that there are more than just one SQL database projects. I have the same for managed instance. I have the same for VM because there are some, I would say minor changes, depending on the version. Let's go with SQL database. That is the one I'm looking for. So a project for creating an Azure SQL database, including maintenance. So the name or the description already indicates that there's definitely more than just an empty SSDT solution. It will already cover maintenances, definitely much more, but okay, it was me who created the description, and maybe I will even extend that one later on. So I will give it another name. One is okay. One seems, the other database was named my database. Okay, cool. So let's create this one. And you can see here which is created by the SSDT template. So first of all, my approach was to mirror the order as a folder structure, which we will see here in Management Studio. You can see programmability, stored procedures, functions. So, and this is what people usually are familiar with. So I want to keep the same structure, because the more objects, the more SQL files you have in your project, the more overwhelming it will be when you have just one folder or even just put all the SQL files within the project. That works, but you will pretty likely figure out that this is not a very good practice to do. So let me go here, and you can see, for example, when I'm gonna go to programmability, so to functions, so we can see this is what we have here. So a further differentiation between the objects is for sure the object type and the schema. So usually you should have more than one schema, and never ever, and this is really an advice or maybe a strong recommendation, never ever start creating objects within DBO. So let's say we want to create a table valued function, which is in schema test. Test is definitely also not a meaningful schema, but that's perfectly fine. So now I can add a new one, I can create a script, can say it is a build, because this is nothing else than an object which I'm going to create. And here we can use our, I hope, sorry for that. I reinstalled Visual Studio. That is a reason why we cannot see my individual snippets here, but you can see there's a list available already. So you can imagine that when I copy these snippets to the SSDT folder, which is different to the SSMS folder, and will add the folder, we will see the snippets in this list as well. So because these are from Microsoft. But again, you can definitely imagine that this finally works. Okay. You create your function with your code snippets, you create your procedures, your tables, whatever you need. So how can you create these kind of SSDT templates? And before I will show you how it works, I will show you that there's definitely much more in the SSDT template, which we need to cover. So first of all, we can see we have our snippets. That means I don't even need to go to the repository to get all the snippets. I can just copy the snippets as a one-off, to the dedicated folder. There's some kind of a description available that people and developers understand where to copy the snippet folder so that they can use these snippets in SSDT as well as SSMS. So then we have something which is the index optimization. So there is, and what I will do is I will go to my database, that one, which is exactly the same SSDT template, but I already replaced some of the placeholders, so that finally the script will work. Because, for example, when we go to the PowerShell script, I cannot foresee the subscription, the tenant and the resource group name and the automation account, and the schedule. That is the reason why when you create the project with the SSDT template from scratch, that you will see something like this. So this is for sure something you need to enter, because nothing which I can foresee or the SSDT template can't foresee. So let me go to this solution. All the values are already predefined. And I mean, you know that, hopefully you know that SQL database needs index maintenance, statistic maintenance. So what I was able to do, it took me a while, but you know that there is a great solution from Ola Harlengreen available, which also runs in Azure SQL Database, Managed Instance, and for sure VM. So let me open that one. I'm pretty sure everyone of you know about the solution, right? And there's one which is the index optimize. That is at least required for the SQL database, right? Database backup for VM, or you can use Azure VM backup service, the Azure backup service. It's your personal preference, I would say. Integrity check is something which you have to do on the VM. On the managed instance, sometimes they're telling us, it is a good idea to still to do it. Well, there are other opinions. Let's do it in this way. But you can already imagine, depending on the purpose of the SSDT template, you either have just index optimize, you will end up with a database backup, as well as an integrity check. So when you have a VM, for example. So here in this SSDT template, because this is a SQL database, Azure SQL database template, I've just the maintenance in place. That means we have the run book. So you can see this is a run book where I define all the parameters which Ola Harlengreen's solution provides. Then we have a bicep template, which we will use in order to run the schedule, for example, and that's all you need to do. So let me go back to the PowerShell script. Just want to give you a quick understanding. I mean, it seems to be simple, but I mean, you have to worry about the automation account. You have a run book, you have a schedule, and finally you have to import and publish the run book. But this is very well documented by Microsoft, and I mean, I'm not a PowerShell expert, far away, yeah, but I was able to do it. So I'm pretty sure that you are able to do this as well. So let me run one of the statements. If I remember correctly, I did it already for test, but not for development. I hope I don't mix it up. So let me go with this one file, PowerShell, and enter everything. So, and again, this is part of the SSDT template, right? The bicep template is part of the SSDT template as well as the runbook. So I only need to worry about these parameters. And the database, for example, the database name is already taken by the name of the project, which is the name of the SQL database. I will tell you how you can achieve this, yeah, but for now, I will give it a try. Hopefully it works. Google. Yeah, it works. Yeah, that's cool. It will take roughly a minute. In the meanwhile, we can go to the same runbook, same schedule, and and all the other resources which are required in my test environment, because before this presentation, I already did it for the test. This one. By the way, this is a result of the bicep template for the production environment. Now we can see we have 5 of them available. And what I will do is, because I want to save some money, I will drop this one. There's no need for a production environment for this presentation. Okay, let me go back to the resource group. Let me go to is this done? Yeah, it's done. So I can either use development or I can use test. I don't care anymore. Let's go to test. So what we can see now is we have a runbook. Within the runbook, we have in portal, the other one. This is a runbook which we already have seen in the SSDT template. Let's go back and open that one. That is the runbook, yeah, which I will use over and over and over again whenever I create a SQL database. Just run the PowerShell script, or create an infrastructure as a code pipeline, which calls a PowerShell script, which finally calls a bicep template, and will create all the required resources. Yeah, so which is the runbook. We have a schedule. So you can see the parameters which I need to define. Oops, sorry. That was wrong. SQL server name, SQL database name. That is something for sure which is unique. And that is something which I need to provide. And then that's it. We have an automation account as well, which finally have all the permissions to run the stored procedures on your SQL database. And now let's go to the stored procedures, because maintenance is not just a runbook, because this is nothing else than calling the stored procedure, right? Let me go to the stored procedure. We can see here that we have programmability, stored procedure, and we have one schema which is called maintenance. And within the maintenance schema, we have again the Ola Harlan-Green solution, which is the index optimized one. I have rewritten this just a bit, yeah, because the problem about PowerShell is that it cannot handle null values, which is a little bit, yeah, tricky, because when you have something like this, you have to ensure that you pass a parameter, or you have to replace the default null with a meaningful, or with a not meaningful parameter like this -1. Yeah, it's a little bit tricky. It took me a while, but it's still the same procedure which you can download for free from. By the way, there's a typo, right? Procedure, yeah, for free from Ola Harlan-Green. Yeah, so that is the stored procedure. So that means we have an automation account, we have a schedule, and the schedule will run the runbook. The runbook will call the stored procedure with the identity and the permissions of the automation account. That means we have to create an automation account, which I do in my SSDT solution somewhere. Let me go to security. And by the way, I will drop this one because otherwise it's a little bit confusing for me. remove. Don't save. Good. Now let's go to security. And we have the automation account here. And you can see this automation account is unique for every single database. Yeah? So, and we have to use a SQL CMD variable instead. And you can, hopefully you know what a SQL CMD variable is. Otherwise, I will go to the properties and will show you the SQL CMD variables. Yeah? So I have a few of them. And one of the SQL CMD variables is automation account. So when we now go to the publish statement, so you can see here on the right-hand side, there are 3 publish statements, one for development, one for production, one for test. Let me go with test. And so here I define all the variables, the size of the database, the automation account, the environment, which is pretty useful when you want to distinguish between the environments. Let's say you want to insert other values by a merge statement in test, then in dev. So with the SQL CMD variable, which I call environment, you can always distinguish and identify the SQL database where you're currently pushing your code. Yeah, I mean, for sure you can also set up your storage account with a blob container and have your CSV files there and XML as a schema definition with a bike insert finally. But believe me, it is a very, very nice and a very easy way, yeah, to create an environment SQL CMD variable up front, which can be either test, development, production, I don't know, maybe of pre-prod, I don't know. You can define this on your own. You can see the automation account, for example, is the AARG demo test. Yeah? So, and when I open the same for the development, for the publish statement development, we will see this is, what is it? AARG demo dev, prod. You can already imagine how it works. Yeah? So this is the idea of SQL CMD variables. Yeah? Pretty handy. You can do a lot of amazing stuff with it. So, and let me go further. So yeah, we have configuration as already mentioned. So delayed durability, which isn't part of the database properties yet. I don't know why, but we still have to define it with tsql command, which is pretty nice. Yeah, there's nothing wrong about it. But when you go to the database properties, yeah, so that is here, database properties. I cannot define something like delayed durability. There's nothing, or maybe it was added and I cannot see it yet. There's nothing. Yeah. So there are some of the, I would say, configurations which I can set, but some of them are not available yet, and that is the reason why I have my own configuration scripts, like optimize for talk workload. I have the service level objective, which is the size and the compute power of the database. So that means these statements will be executed in a so-called pre-deployment statement. That means your database is created, pre-deployment happens, and then your build happens, and then your post-deployment happens. For example, when you want to insert some records into the table or into the tables you created, that is something you will do in the post-deployment statement, because in your pre-deployment statement, these tables aren't there. Yeah, so for sure, yeah, because of the order. Yeah. So you can see the post-deployment, the pre-deployment statements here, as mentioned. So that's cool. Everything works. So now I will tell you how you can define your own SSDT template with all this kind of functionality. Yeah? So what you can do is you can either create, or the other way around. I think, to be honest, for me, I started with creating the folder structure, the files, everything like this. But I mean, or the other way around. I had a solution which was fine. It was maybe 80% complete. Yeah? And at that point in time, I know that I have to add more, I don't know, scripts in future. But what you can do is when you have maybe 80% available, you can say, export template. So you want to create a project template based on the folder structure, which includes all the files which you can see here, right? And you can give it a meaningful name. Here, that's definitely, sorry, not here, here. You can give it a meaningful name, like, I don't know, SSDT template for SQL database, something like this. And you can add your own image. And finally, it is nothing else than, I don't want to push it here because it is already there. It's a zip file. Let me open the zip file for you. So this is the zip file which consists of all the objects which you need in order to create your SSDT template, which you defined in your Visual Studio solution, or to be precise, in your project. So we can see we have, for example, configuration. We have the scripts, which I already mentioned. They are part of the zip file. The folder itself, all the folders which we can see on the right-hand side, are not part of the zip file. Instead, they are part of the VS template file. Let me go to this one. And let me copy this to Notepad++, which is a little bit better to read. Yeah, I can overwrite. Yes, I can overwrite this one. So you can see how it works. It is nothing else than an XML file which defines all the project items. So, for example, you define all the snippets. Let me go down. So you define your index optimize folder with all the files, target file name, deploy index optimize PS1. That is a PowerShell script which I already shared with you. So you can see it's pretty easy to create the folder structure and also add the files you want to see within the folder whenever you create a new project based on your new SSDT template. Yeah, there's something I want to mention here. There are so-called replace, or there is a property which is replace parameter. And maybe you wonder what it is. So when we go to the PowerShell script, for example, I hope it is there. Where is it? Configuration deployment. No, not here. It's in, I didn't remember anymore. I need to cheat. In index optimize, okay. Index optimize isn't here. It's a little strange. Configuration miscellaneous. Here, good. So either in this file or in the other file. I didn't remember anymore. Yes. So let me also copy this one to Notepad++ because it's easier to read. So what you can see here is a project, so-called project template parameter, which you can see is the $project name, which will be replaced whenever you create your SSDT template, but only when you create your SSDT template, never ever again. So that means, remember that I entered the name of the project, which was my database. Yeah, finally it was my database, because I already told you it's a very good idea to call the project like the database. Yeah. So, and you can see that the database name is now replaced by the project name. And there's a bunch, not a bunch, but there are a few template parameters which are documented. So something like, you can see GUID, item name, machine name, project name, and so forth. All these, or there are maybe 20 of them, yeah. Some of them it would be good to when Microsoft will add them, but anyway, this is what we have and it works. Yeah. Sometimes you have to do it in some kind of a workaround, to replace something which isn't part of the template parameters yet, but it still works. Yeah. So what I want to say is the save project name, or the project name, that one, that is the name of the name provided by the user when the project was created. And when I tell Microsoft or Visual Studio to replace a parameter, it will look into the file. This is not the file. This is not the PowerShell script, but let me search for it. Here's one. Here. So you can see that I'm replacing the template parameter in the target file when I create the SSDT template the very first time. That is pretty handy because you can replace a lot of values already when you create your SSDT template, so that the user does not need to update the values or even enter the right value. That is really, really handy and makes it much, much easier even to use the SSDT templates. It will give you much more functionality and much more flexibility, and you have your standard in place, the standard you are currently defining in your VS template. So you can see how it works. You can see by the name, by the way, there is here, I didn't remember anymore. Here, you can even use the template parameter in the name of the file. So you can see SQL database build and deploys is a YAML pipeline. That is my Azure DevOps pipeline. So when I go down, we can see that the name of the pipeline, or the name of the file to be precise, because the YAML file is not a pipeline yet, it's just a YAML file. But you can see the name of the file is the project, the placeholder project is replaced by the name of the project. Why? Because finally I will create a YAML pipeline in Azure DevOps based on this YAML file. And you can see that my database is replaced over and over and over whenever it makes sense. So that means developers do not need to worry about the right name of the file name of the YAML Azure DevOps pipeline. And there are just a few exceptions, like the service connection. And I think that's all, to be honest. Service connection. Maybe that's all. I cannot foresee. So that is what people, or what a developer needs to update the very first time. And then the entire Azure DevOps pipeline is there. So we have a template here, a build template, right, which I will use over and over. So this is normally in a centralized repository, which I consume from the main template. And we have a deployment template, which I also will use over and over. For every single object, I will use the same template, which is located in a centralized repository, which will be consumed by my pipeline. In my pipeline, I'm just calling the templates and will pass the right parameters, which I define here in a library. That means finally, I don't need to change anything because it is either the template or it is the pipeline. And when they are, apart from the service connection, which cannot be part of your library for whatever reason, don't ask me, but the library itself hosts all the variables which I need to execute the pipeline for this specific database, which is my database test. My database, sorry, that one. Yeah, that is how it works. So let me go to my notes. Maintenance, runbook, I guess I covered that one. Template parameters, just want to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. Yes, and finally, what you have to do is, whenever you create your own SSDT template, which takes a while to be honest, but consider this to be a programming asset, which can be used by you, by other developers, by other projects. You can already imagine that after just a few projects, the time you spend and the cost you spend are already covered, and every new project will definitely benefit from your SSDT templates, YAML templates, everything, bicep templates, because they save a lot of money and time. Yeah, it takes maybe, I would say, to be honest, creating your Azure resources with the security, creating your I would say your individual, let's call it development framework. Yeah, the Azure CI/CD pipeline and everything which is needed, it takes at least, I don't know, 6 up to 8 weeks. Yeah, So everything works, yeah, completely from scratch and end to end. Yeah, and you can already imagine that when you create something like this, you are done within, I don't know, let's say half a day. Yeah. So when you have your SSDT template available, which is finally a zip file, you just have to replace it to this folder, which is Documents Visual Studio 2022 or 2019. I think it still also works with 17, but I don't think that people are still using 17, but 19 works, 2020 works. You just have to replace, not replace, you have to paste your SQL database zip SSDT template, again, that one you already know, right? Within this folder, reopen Visual Studio so that the cache is deleted, and then this one is visible, yeah, depending on the description. Let me go to the VS template another time. So you can see here, this is really hard to read. Sorry for that. Here we go. On the top, you can define the description, you can define the project type, you can define a lot of more things. You can give your own, or you can add your own image, which I really like. That one, for example, and you're done. That's it. So there is another file which is pretty important, which is a SQL project file. So every project, SSDT project, have an SSDT project file, which is in my case the name of the database. And let me open that one. And I will also copy this to Notepad++. We can see that within the template, all the SQL CMD variables are here, for example, have a predefined default when it makes sense. And okay, maybe that is something I don't want to cover now because I have only 15 minutes left. So just 2 sentences on this. There are different configurations which you can define here. And we can define something like test, production, and development, which is exactly the same naming convention which we will use over and over again. So the idea is that I can deploy the security, for example, different. So the problem is the following. I want to have different users, different permissions. It's pretty likely in development, in test, and production. How can I achieve this? For sure, now you can work with post-deployment, which is so super annoying, which is so super buggy. Because it's not buggy because it's the way Microsoft implemented this. No, it is buggy because a post-deployment statement, which is also the same for the pre-deployment statement, by the way, is not part of your, this is wrong. How can I say? It will not be built. So therefore, there is no, I would say, no validation. For example, when you want to create, or when you add a new user to a specific database group, you can say this by alter role, I don't know, whatever, DB manager, yeah, add user. Okay, now you define your AAD user, perfectly fine. But when you forget to create the AAD user up front, you cannot add the user to the role. When you run something like this in your post-deployment, it will not be validated. It will just be validated when the code is finally executed as a post-deployment. So what I want to do instead is I want to have all my users, all my permission, everything as part of my build of my duckpack file, because then I already know when my build is successful, my deployment will be successful. But now I have a problem. I cannot define the same user in 2 environments or even 3 environments with different permissions. That's not possible because I cannot differentiate between the environments by default in Visual Studio. How can I do it? I can create my own configurations. Test, development, production. I can even add more. And finally, you have something like a condition, a conditional statement, which is when your configuration is set to development, include everything in security environments development, all the SQL statements, and 2 other folders. I don't want to talk about this one. Just consider this one for the moment, right? But exclude everything which we will have in production, in the production folder, in the test folder. With this approach, we will end up with 3 DACPAC files, one for development, one for production, one for test, which I can finally push to the pipeline, because the pipeline is aware about the configuration, and it will either use DACPAC A, B, also DACPAC dev, test, or production, and will push it to the appropriate environment. And I can ensure that whenever the build is successful, that my deployment will be successful as well. That is how it normally should work. And that is how you can implement that stuff. So finally, so let me, hopefully I don't forget anything. 1 second. Replace, configuration script, maintenance, SSDT. Cool. Now I want to create my Azure DevOps. I will take another, it will take roughly 10 minutes. Yeah? So maybe you can give me 10 minutes and I can cover Azure DevOps, not in detail, just because you can see this is, I would say, not a very detailed presentation, because I have no time to dive into the code, but the aim is to give you an understanding what is possible and how you can benefit from all these kind of templates and, yeah, let's say templates. Okay, so let's start with the Azure DevOps. So Azure DevOps pipeline, as already mentioned, is part of my project. So that is here. So we have a code scan, Sonar code scan, which is sometimes used, sometimes it isn't. So I have a variable which either runs a code scan or not. Yeah? So for simplification, I completely ignored that one. The main pipeline is this one, as already mentioned. So I defined an object here, which I consider to be an array. Yeah, so we have 3 environments. Let's do it this way. We have 3 environments. Prod. Yeah, so we have that test prod. If I want to add a new, let's say, environment, a new stage, yeah, create one. Let's say we have, I don't know, pre-prod. The stage is called pre-prod or pre-production. Yeah? So I'm not a very big fan of abbreviations. And I need to define a service connection which isn't in place yet, but you get the idea. And then I need to define my library, which will be pre-prod. So let me delete that one. That's all you need to do. And you have a trigger for sure. Whenever you have a code change, the pipeline will automatically be triggered to validate that your build will be validated and is successfully built. Your DACPAC is built. Yeah, so that makes sense. So, and finally, you will call the 2 templates, which will create your build, which is a DACPAC file, the artifact, the build artifact of a SQL package.exe, which is, of an MS build or VS build is the DACPAC file. And then we will deploy the DACPAC file by comparing the content of the DACPAC file, which is always which is always the entire instruction to create your entire database from scratch. That means in your DACPAC file, you will only see create statements. But SQL package.exe will compare the content of the DACPAC file with the target environment. And let's say we created a new test table, or table, call it test, in my SSDT template. It will create a new test table because the test table isn't there in my target environment yet. Or if I drop the test table in my code, SQL package.exe automatically detects, okay, the table isn't part of my code anymore. Drop the table. Their mechanism in order to avoid to drop a table when there are data in, to avoid that we are losing data. That is something which you can define in the publish statements. There's a bunch. This is really a nightmare. Yeah, this is here. you can do, there's so many properties, and the problem is that, I mean, these are, I would say most of them are clear. Some of them are not clear, or you think they are clear, and finally you figure out that they aren't working in the way you expected. So this is a little bit more complicated, yeah, to set the right configuration. I mean, Microsoft has its own set of properties, but to be honest, I override them. Yeah, some of them I completely either disable when they are enabled, or I enable them when they are disabled. Yeah, but this takes a while to figure out what are the right properties. And this is, by the way, this is what you can define here. So drop objects in target but not in source. That is how CIDC works. Make sure that all your code is part of your source code, yeah, your source repository, which will be pushed by the CIDC pipeline. If you have a lazy developer and you will create something in development, that's maybe okay. That is the reason why I'm not dropping something in development, but in test and production, when there's something which isn't part of my code, but our repository, it will be completely dropped. I don't care. That is not the idea of CIDC. You don't have a controlled environment anymore. You cannot rely on a Duck Park version. You cannot rely on auditing. You cannot rely on nothing anymore. So when you have your CIDC pipeline, or with a YAML code, you have your CIDC pipeline, but finally you have to create an environment first. So you can see that, for example, that one was the one which I executed before the presentation. Last activity. Okay, I don't care. So at least what I do is I use the approvals and checks, right, to define approvers. That means, yeah, in development, I don't care. I don't want to have, it's my personal opinion. Some projects maybe require something different, but in development, it's okay for me when someone pushes something without an approver. But in test, I have at least one approver, and in production, I have at least two approvers. Both of them need to prove that the code will be finally pushed to the target environment. Okay, so that is the environment, and then we have something which we will call library. A library is a collection of variables which can be either located and also maintained within Azure DevOps, or you can use an Azure Key Vault, whatever you prefer. So you can see that these are the variables which I need, or the YAML template needs. Yeah? For example, the artifact feed name. We will cover artifact feed in a moment. Then the deployment pool name. Yeah, if you have your self-hosted agent, you will override the pool name by your self-hosted agent pool name, and your pipeline works. You don't need to go into the pipeline anymore. So enable script, this is something which I will show you. And then we have the environment suffix, as we already have seen. So this can be finally dev, it can be test, but this is automatically, let's say, concatenated by the object and the loop through the array within the YAML pipeline. Yeah, and that is the reason why we need this information. Let me go back to the YAML code. Cancel here. That is what I need. So the suffix is there. I need to define this. Now we stick to naming convention. Every environment is named as env minus database name minus SQL minus dev minus test minus prod. And you can see when I stick to naming convention, it's pretty easy to derive all the values within my pipeline. So let's go to artifact feed. So you know that you can consume and you can save your build artifacts, which is Duck Park file, in an artifact feed, which is a better approach than saving them in different places, because you can always download by connecting to the feed. You need to have a PAT, also a personal access token. So, and then you can easily download a specific version. As you can see, this is version 11. Maybe you want to go to version 09, yeah, because of debugging, of auditing reason, you want to understand what was changed. And you can compare DuckBug files, by the way, by Visual Studio. You can say tools. Where is the compare SQL Server? It's not here, sorry. I didn't remember anywhere where it is. Okay, I have a comparison here. Compare here. So we can use comparison, yeah, between two DuckBug files. Maybe you ask yourself, what was the database instruction of DuckBug version 009, yeah, comparing to the latest, which is 0011. You can easily do it by Visual Studio, for example. There are other tools available, but this is definitely for free. So this is also for auditing, because I want to understand what was changed, and I want to audit my changes, at least for a while. Yeah? So there's a retention period which you can define on in your artifact feed to get rid of older environments or older DuckBug releases. Yeah? So, and finally, you create your pipeline in this way, that you create, or let me go this way. We can create a new pipeline. Where's your code? It is already there, because we are, sorry, I forgot to mention that finally, I mean, that's for sure. We need to push, first of all, we need to connect our SSDT project to an Azure DevOps repository, so that we finally can create a commit and push it to the repository. I mean, that's for sure, yeah. But once we have it, we can easily use the YAML pipeline or the YAML file. It's not a pipeline yet, but now it becomes a pipeline. Okay, and don't ask me why the name of the pipeline is always wrong. So let's save and rename. That is what I prefer. Again, it's my personal opinion to stick to some kind of naming convention. It's already there. It's fine, because the pipeline, I created the pipeline upfront. Yeah, but you understand how it works. Yeah? We can now consume the YAML file, can create a pipeline on top of it. So, and finally, what you have to do is you have to go to branches and define the branch policies and say, I don't know, require a minimum of reviewers. I'm the only person in my organization, so therefore I think I have to go with one and allow requesters to approve their own change, because otherwise it will not work for me. Check for link items. So that is a way to connect your commit, your pull request, to be precise, with your Azure DevOps board, so that every PR should have at least one linked work item for documentation and auditing as well. Check comment resolution. For me, it makes no sense, because I'm the only person, so there is no one who will approve my change or maybe leave a comment which I need to resolve. But okay, that is something which should be normally set to on. And here I can create or use my pipeline now. Perfect. Nothing I need to do. So that means whenever I can give it a try. I didn't try it before the presentation, to be honest. Let's give it a try. That means my branch policy is in place. I think what I need to do is, because this is a little bit, I mean, that is something you don't want to have. I don't want to create a PR when I debug something like this for a presentation like this. That is the reason why I disabled the condition. So that means now I need to create my feature branch. I don't know, I call it first demo based on main, commit and checkout. So first demo pipeline. Okay, that seems to be good. And now I will push everything. Hopefully it works. So I'm pushing to the repository. That's fine. And now we should see that the pipeline should work. Yeah, this is because the, let me think about it. Normally it should work already, but maybe the order was wrong. Next time, I'm pretty sure the pipeline will run. Let me create a PR. Yes, so you can see, I have to create a new pull request now. I can give it a more meaningful description. I can add reviewers. Again, I'm the only person in my organization. I can add a work link item, which isn't in place because I don't have my Azure DevOps bot, and I can say create. So, environment, pre-prod environment could not be found. Yeah. There are good reasons. Let me do it another time. There are good reasons that I disabled production because I deleted the production. You remember that, hopefully. And I don't want to overcomplicate this one because otherwise it takes a few minutes to run through the build for development and also run through the build for test. That is why I want to comment these lines so that I will end up just with test. And the idea is the same. I'm pretty sure you get the idea. I will build just one environment, push, and hopefully this time it works. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure you can imagine what will happen. So syncing. Yes, okay. So, okay, cool. Work items must be linked. I thought that I didn't enable that one. Yeah. My mistake. Now it should run. Yes. Okay, so you can see now the build runs. Build is in progress. And when I approve, the build will run another time and the deployment will run. That means my duckpack file is compared to test in this case, because we have only one environment left. And all the code changes will go to the test environment. As we can see it here, yeah, this was one of my former pipeline runs. So you can see this is currently running, right? Let me go to this one because this is already done. So you can see the build. Yeah, so we are installing the latest DuckFX files. It's always a good idea. We are building the solution. So you can see the title is already some kind of meaningful for debugging. So we are creating a schema drift report. I will tell you what it is in a minute. We are publishing the schema drift report. We will copy everything, and finally we will push it to the artifact feed, right? And then we will deploy everything. One last minute. So the schema drift report is something which I really find handy. So let me go to this one, and you can see that I will end up with 3 folders: test, production, dev. Development, test, and production. But remember, I disabled all of them, or comment. I added a comment, but I need to approve. Finally, someone needs to approve the changes. How can I do it? I'm not going to the PRs in order to check what code was changed. So instead, the schema drift report is an option or a parameter, or it's an option of SQL package.exe, which will create this tsql command, which will be finally executed on my target environment. So that means with the schema drift report, I understand what will be deployed so that I can approve. When I see something like, I don't know, drop table, whatever, yeah, and I didn't expect this, yeah, I don't know, there's no table yet. But you get the idea. When I see something like this in a SQL statement, I would like to have a conversation or call with a developer to understand why he's dropping a table, yeah, or a stored procedure or whatever. It depends, yeah, because I'm the person who needs to approve a change from another developer. So, and this will tell me what the developer finally will change. So you can see this is, by the way, everything with regards to the pre-deployment. We have our build, there's nothing in the build. I didn't create a table yet. No, there's nothing. And then we have the post deployment, update complete. In this case, I'm fine with the approval. But again, maybe there's someone who's dropping tables, dropping sub procedures, and this is what I will see before I can approve, or I will approve. And finally, everything is part of the artifact for monitoring and auditing. That is how it works. So hopefully, just want to summarize. You've seen that we have a bicep template in place where we call modules to create the overall SQL environment based on standard parameters, which we have in parameter JSON file. And this is something which you can either run by PowerShell or Azure CLI finally, and you can create it. You can run the PowerShell script, I don't know, from an IDE as a PS1, or you can create an infrastructure as a code pipeline in exactly the same way as we created the CIDC pipeline. It's much easier, to be honest, so that you have environment in place. Then you create your code snippets, creating tables, views, stored procedures, maybe roughly 20 or a bit more objects. So these objects you always need to stick to naming convention and also have this kind of rapid development. Then you create your SSDT template by exporting the template. And finally, I'm pretty sure you will use the XML VS template and SQL project file to add more and more files, which should be part, or more and more folders and files. Files has to be part of your zip file. Everything finally is a zip file. And this is something which you have to place in the right order so that Visual Studio knows, oh, there's a new project template. Let's use it. Within your SSDT template, you should have something like index maintenance, at least configuration, these kind of scripts which you will run and repeat over and over and again. Okay. And finally, you have your Azure CI CD pipeline. Azure CIDC pipeline, which builds, this is the CI part of the CIDC pipeline, which builds the artifact, which is a dark pack, and will deploy, this is CD of CIDC, will deploy all your code changes to the appropriate target environment based on library variables, and based on approvals. That's it. Do you have any questions? No question?
No, not at this time.
Okay. That's okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear.
All right. No, we do not have any questions. So, folks, remember, add your questions to the live chat. Add your questions to the live chat. And in the meantime, thank you very much, Torsten, for making the time to be here with us, share the knowledge and this great presentation.
Thank you very much.
It has been a great learning opportunity here for us all. You cover so many key elements through the process and use for the Rapid Azure SQL Development, which also includes biceps, includes the templates that you showed of SSDT, all the way down to the Azure DevOps, and the potential implementation there for CI CD. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Very enlightening, the information there. And folks, if you have any questions, remember, just one more minute here before we finish for you to enter your question in the live chat. In the meantime, I also like to remind you to take a minute to like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell so you'll get reminders as we post new presentations. And as well, thank you all very much. Let me take a quick look here, see if there are any questions. I do not see any questions. So folks, thank you very much. And I thank you again, Torsten.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
For the great presentation there. And I look forward to seeing everyone on our next presentation. And Torsten, hang on just a second. And I look for, hang on just a second, do not drop off.
Yeah, I will, yeah.
So folks, look forward to see you all on our next presentation. And if you have any questions going forth, use the comment section below. Thank you very much. Have a good night, y'all, folks.